Every story has a turning point, a moment when everything changes. The turning point.
It had been 3 weeks since we buried my mother. 3 weeks since I'd held her hand for the last time and whispered goodbye through the hospital static. I hadn't gone back to the house since. I couldn't. Not until now. I pulled into the driveway just after noon. It was a bright day, unnaturally cheerful. Birds chirping, sky spotless. The first thing I noticed, the lawn was trimmed. The hedges were shaped. The garden beds were weeded. That stopped me cold. Mom hadn't hired landscapers in over a year. And I knew none of the neighbors well enough for them to do this on their own. Maybe someone had just been kind, I thought. A helpful neighbor. A silent favor. I stepped out of the car slowly, walked up the path like I'd done 1,000 times before. But when I reached the porch, the front door was open, and through the entryway I saw cardboard boxes, a lot of them, tape still on, labels handwritten in marker. Kitchen stuff, Jack's clothes, MISC. A woman in her 30s appeared in the doorway, holding a phone in one hand and a pacifier in the other. She froze when she saw me. "Hi," I said cautiously. Is, this your house?" She blinked, unsure. "Yes." My throat tightened. This was my mother's home. Nancy Caldwell, I'm her daughter. She passed away a few weeks ago. I didn't know anyone had moved in yet. The woman's expression softened. She stepped out onto the porch, keeping a hand on the door. "Oh," she said, "I'm really sorry we just moved in 4 days ago. We bought it 2 weeks back. Closing was super fast." Behind her, a man stepped into view, balancing a toddler on his hip. I stared at them, at the boxes behind them, the family photos already on the entryway table, a baby shoe on the floor, a dog bed near the stairs. "Bought it from who?" I asked. My voice was getting thinner. "From a man named Paul Andrews," the husband answered. "He said he was handling the estate privately. Said the family wanted a quick sale. We were honestly shocked by the price. It was way under value." He looked almost embarrassed. I took a deep breath. This is the first I'm hearing about any of this. I was the only child. She never said anything about selling. The woman exchanged a glance with her husband. Then she quietly said, "Do you want to come in for a minute?" I shook my head. I'm sorry, I need to call the police." They didn't stop me. 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. The officers reviewed the documents the new family provided: deed transfer, notary stamp, payment records, title confirmation, all filed with the county, all clean. "It looks legitimate," the officer said carefully. "The house was sold by a man with power of attorney. It's legally theirs now." "But my mother would never—" I stopped myself. "I don't even know who this man is." "Do you have any documentation disputing the transfer?" the officer asked. "A will? Medical records? Anything to prove she wasn't competent?" I stared at him. "I wasn't even told the house was being sold," I said quietly. "There was no will. She was getting weaker. But she wasn't confused. Not like this." "I'm sorry," the younger officer said gently. "But without legal grounds to dispute the sale, we can't force them out. You're no longer the owner of record." Back in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring up at the house that used to be mine. The shutters had been painted, the porch light replaced. It wasn't hers anymore. It wasn't mine. And that man, Paul Andrews, whoever he was, he'd taken something that didn't belong to him. The family inside? Probably just lucky buyers. But someone, somewhere, had lied. And that lie cost me everything. I opened my phone, searched the property database. There it was. Transfer of ownership. Seller, Paul Andrews. Buyer, Laura and Jack Dempsey. Date, 2 weeks ago. Amount, $142,000. Half of what the house was worth. Why would she do that? She wouldn't, which meant someone else did it for her, and I was going to find out who. The motel room smelled like mildew and burnt coffee. I hadn't planned to stay overnight, but after being told by police that I was no longer the legal owner of my own mother's house, I couldn't bring myself to drive back. Not yet. Not with that family unpacking boxes in the living room where I used to do puzzles with Mom. So I sat cross-legged on the edge of the stiff bed, laptop open, legal pads scattered with scribbled names and dates. The name Paul Andrews circled in red ink over and over. Who was he? How did he even get power of attorney? I started with the county records. The property transfer looked legitimate. Filed, stamped, finalized. Seller, Paul W. Andrews. No middle name, no company affiliation, just a basic mailing address. A P.O. box in Sarasota. I Googled the name. Hundreds of hits, real estate agents, chiropractors, a jazz pianist. None of them fit. I cross-searched with power of attorney Nancy Caldwell. Only one match, a filing from 4 weeks ago. Scanned document, barely legible. My mother's signature next to Paul's name, witnessed and notarized. The notary listed was someone named Karen Shaw, license number included. I clicked on her profile. License expired. Registered in Michigan. Last active 6 years ago. What? The next morning I called the title company listed on the deed. "Hi, I'm trying to confirm a transaction handled by your office," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Property on 284 Cypress Lane. Sold 2 weeks ago by Paul Andrews." The woman on the line asked me to hold. A few minutes later, she returned. "Yes, I see the file. Looks like everything cleared. I'm not at liberty to discuss seller information, but I can confirm we processed the transaction." "Do you vet identities during sales?" I asked. "We process documents presented to us," she replied. "It's the responsibility of the parties involved to ensure their legality. If fraud is suspected, that's something to report to law enforcement." Right. I had. And they told me to come back with proof. I found Karen Shaw's number buried in a licensing database. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice was raspy and tired, like someone who'd spent years pretending not to care anymore. "I haven't notarized anything in ages," she said when I asked. "I left that work behind after a health scare." "Are you aware someone's using your license on active documents?" Dead silence. "No," she said finally. "But I've had weird calls lately. Letters from banks I've never worked with. Maybe someone pulled my info from an old registry. Someone used your name to notarize a power of attorney form for my mother. She passed away last month." More silence. Then, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. You should probably talk to a fraud investigator." I was already dialing the state licensing board before she hung up. That afternoon, I returned to the neighborhood. I didn't knock on the door, didn't want to rattle the new owners. I just walked the sidewalk, pretending to talk on the phone, taking pictures from across the street. Windows, mailbox, porch. One of the boxes in the living room was still sealed, labeled Books Jack. The baby cried faintly in the background. I didn't blame them. They were victims too. But I couldn't let this go. Back in the car, I opened my notes again. Paul W. Andrews, Karen Shaw, stolen notary identity, fake documents, quick sale, cash transfer. None of it made sense, unless this guy did it before, unless this was what he did for a living. That night, I posted on a legal forum a vague question about power of attorney fraud. Then a second post, more specific. Has anyone heard of Paul W. Andrews facilitating private estate sales after a death? One reply came within an hour. A woman named Rachel. My aunt's house was sold under similar circumstances. A man named Paul handled it privately. She was ill. By the time we realized what had happened, the house was gone. It took us months to reverse the sale. We couldn't prove coercion. We lost it. I replied instantly. She sent more. Photos. One of them was blurry but clear enough. It was him. Tall, late 40s, clean-shaven, baseball cap, blue windbreaker. Same face I remembered from the notary form. This wasn't a one-time scheme. This was a pattern. I stared at the screen, goosebumps rising on my arms. My pulse was pounding, but my hands felt cold. Paul Andrews wasn't just a fraud, he was a professional. And my mother might have been his last job. I couldn't sleep. Even with the motel TV on low and my phone glowing next to me, my thoughts kept circling the same truth. He'd done this before. Rachel's message wouldn't leave my head. She'd lost her aunt's house to this same man, Paul Andrews, under almost identical circumstances. The documents, the speed, the lowball price, the sudden vanishing act. She said they tried everything: lawyers, police, the press. But without a confession or solid proof of manipulation, the case was shelved. It felt like screaming into a black hole, she wrote. I wasn't ready to accept that ending. Not for her, not for me. The next morning, I called her. Her voice was stronger than I expected. Calm, steady, like someone who'd already lived through the worst of it. I'm really sorry this happened to you, she said after I introduced myself. And I hate to say it, but it won't be easy. He's good. He's not flashy, not greedy. He takes just enough and leaves the paperwork airtight. What did you find out about him? I asked. She sighed. Not much. Everything was under different aliases. Paul W. Andrews, Paul Weston, Peter Allen, all with just enough variation to keep him floating. His addresses were always P.O. boxes. No employer, no social security match we could trace. I swallowed. How many people? I know 4 other families, including ours, she said. But that was years ago. Most gave up. The stress just crushed them. I paused. Did anyone get close to stopping him? A silence. Then, there was one woman. Her name was Virginia Ellis. She was 83, lived in a quiet town in Georgia. Rachel said she got close enough to scare him off, but not before he'd gotten power of attorney over her finances. She managed to stop the house from being sold, but her accounts were drained. When her son tried to report it, Paul was already gone. He even brought flowers to her nursing home, Rachel added bitterly. He pretended to be a friend of the family. She said he made her feel cared for, like she wasn't a burden. I wrote down the name and address, and the next morning, I got in my car. The nursing home was tucked behind a stretch of pines, quiet and clean. Virginia was in the common room, doing a jigsaw puzzle with gloved hands and reading glasses. She looked up when I approached. Her gaze was sharp but tired. "You're another one," she said before I even introduced myself. I blinked. "Rachel called me last night," she explained. "Told me you might be coming." I sat beside her. "I lost my mother's house," I said quietly. "I didn't even know it was being sold. He signed everything as if she gave him permission." She nodded slowly, like she'd heard it all before. "Mine wasn't the house," she said. "It was my money. $58,000. I was saving it for my grandkids, for when I'm gone." "I'm so sorry," I whispered. She waved a hand. "I've had time to accept it. What still eats at me is how good he was. Soft voice, clean shoes. Always called me ma'am. He never pushed, just suggested. Always let me feel like I was in control." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, "I kept one thing." She reached into her cardigan and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside, a receipt. From a small gas station 2 counties over. A timestamp. A surveillance camera still clipped to it. And Paul's face. Clear, uncovered, full profile. "Why do you still have this?" I asked. "I knew someone like you would come," she said. "Eventually." Back in the car, I stared at the image. Finally. Something real. A face, a date, a location, proof. Not just for me, but maybe enough for the police to stop looking at this as just a civil issue. I opened my phone and sent the image to Rachel, then another to myself, with the message, "He slipped up." It was a small crack, but cracks spread. and Paul Andrews had finally left one behind. The moment I stepped into the precinct, I felt small. The walls were yellowed from old lighting, and the front desk officer barely looked up when I approached. He slid a clipboard toward me like it was muscle memory. "I'm not here to file a report," I said firmly. "I already did. This is a follow-up. I have new evidence." That got his attention. I handed over the printed still from the gas station camera. Paul's face was clear, mid-turn, a receipt in hand, time-stamped just days before my mother's house was sold. He squinted, then raised an eyebrow. "Okay, who is this?" "His name is Paul Andrews. He sold my late mother's house without my knowledge. He's not a relative, not a legal representative, but he somehow filed a power of attorney and transferred the deed to a third party. This photo was taken by a woman he also defrauded. He used her notary identity." The officer glanced at the picture again, then motioned for someone else in the back. A woman in plain clothes stepped forward. Detective, maybe. Sharp suit, serious face. We sat down in a side room, and I laid it all out. The expired notary license, the copy of the deed, the suspiciously low sale price. And now this. The photo and receipt from Virginia Ellis. She listened without interrupting, flipping through the folder I'd organized like my life depended on it. Because it kind of did. When I finished, she leaned back and crossed her arms. "I won't lie," she said. "This is more than most people walk in with. But real estate fraud is hard to prosecute, especially if the documents pass legal review. You're dealing with a civil matter unless we can prove intent or a pattern." "There is a pattern," I argued. "There are at least 5 victims. One of them's willing to testify." "Out-of-state victims complicate jurisdiction," she said. "And unless you can tie all the aliases to one verifiable identity—" "I will," I cut in. "He slipped up. This gas station has more footage. The receipt has a credit card number. You can trace it." She didn't answer at first, just tapped a pen against the desk. Then she said, "I'll make a call, but I can't promise this goes anywhere." It was something, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I drove back to the motel exhausted but wired. I knew I couldn't sit still, so I opened my laptop again and started digging into Karen Shaw, the notary whose license had been stolen. Turns out she wasn't the only one. I found a small online forum for retired legal workers, and buried in an old post from 2022 was a thread about ghost notary fraud, someone using defunct or inactive notary credentials to file power of attorney documents. Anonymous users shared photos, patterns, frustration, and one username kept replying with questions. Paraclete_47. I opened the profile. Last active 3 weeks ago. Location? Unknown. I clicked through old posts, and one of them mentioned Sarasota. Same P.O. Box city listed on my mother's deed transfer. My skin crawled. The next morning, I stopped by a small cafe downtown to get coffee before calling Rachel with updates. I paid in cash, but as I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. A silver sedan parked across the street, windows tinted, engine off, but I'd seen that car before, parked near the nursing home 2 days ago. And again, near the motel last night when I came back from the precinct. I stood still, pretending to check my phone. The car didn't move. A few minutes later, it drove away, slowly, casually, turning without hurry. My heart pounded. Coincidence? Maybe, but after everything I'd uncovered, I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. I called the detective again. "Something's wrong," I told her. "I think someone's watching me." "Have you been threatened?" "No." "Then document everything, dates, times, plates if you can. But unless someone makes contact, we can't open a case." "Of course not." That night, I slept with the motel dresser pushed against the door. I kept the receipt from Virginia Ellis in my pocket. Because now, this wasn't just about my mother's house. Now, it was about staying one step ahead. And Paul Andrews, if that was even his real name, knew I was getting close. The P.O. box listed on the deed transfer sat in a strip mall off a busy Sarasota highway, wedged between a vape shop and a nail salon. Blink and you'd miss it. Inside, the postal store was nearly empty. A teenager behind the counter glanced up with mild disinterest as I approached. "I'm trying to reach the person who rents box 1124, I said. "Paul Andrews. I have reason to believe he used false identification to commit real estate fraud." He raised both eyebrows and took a half step back. "I can't give out customer information," he muttered. "Privacy laws." I slid a printed copy of the deed across the counter. "I'm not asking for private details. I'm telling you someone is using your address to scam elderly people out of their homes. And I'm willing to involve the police if that's what it takes." He hesitated, then leaned in. "That box was closed last week. Guy came in, cleared it out, said he was moving north. Left no forwarding info. Paid cash." "Do you have camera footage?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "We wipe every 10 days, unless someone specifically asks to preserve it." Of course, too late. I stepped outside into the brutal Florida sun, heart pounding with frustration. Every door I opened seemed to close behind me, twice as fast. But then, something, a tiny detail. In the back alley behind the strip mall was a dumpster. Someone had propped open the lid with a broken mop handle, and just inside, a torn envelope. It was addressed to Martin Green. Same box number, 1124. I pulled it out. The return address was a local property management firm. Inside, a late payment notice, past due rent. The property listed was a mobile home on the outskirts of town. My breath caught. It wasn't Paul, but maybe Martin Green was real. Or at least, used to be. The mobile home park was exactly what I expected. Rows of weathered trailers, some with porches sagging from age, others decorated with Christmas lights that hadn't come down since 2015. I found the right unit near the back. Faded blue siding, a crooked mailbox. No car. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Finally, the door opened a few inches. A man in his late 50s squinted at me. Suspicious. Defensive. "Martin Green?" I asked. "Who's asking?" I gave him the short version. Paul Andrews. Fake POA. My mother's house. The Sarasota P.O. box. The letter from the dumpster. His eyes shifted. Then he sighed. "I don't want trouble," he muttered. "He said it was just paperwork, that I was helping a friend get a loan." "You know him?" I asked quickly. "Not well. Just through a guy at the VFW. Said he needed someone with a clean name to forward mail for a while. Offered me a few $100. I didn't ask questions." "Did he use your name anywhere else?" Martin hesitated, then stepped back and pointed to a cardboard box near the door. Inside were 4 prepaid cell phones, a stack of sealed manila envelopes, and a notary stamp. Fake. I stared at it. "You kept all this?" "I was gonna toss it," he shrugged. "But then I saw that name again in the mail. Made me nervous." "Do you know where he is now?" "No," he said flatly. "But he mentioned Savannah. Said it was a good place to disappear." Back in the car, I placed the fake notary stamp on the passenger seat. Proof, again. More than a story now. Physical evidence. I called the detective. She answered on the second ring. "I just met a man whose name Paul used for his mailing address," I told her. "He has fake stamps, burner phones, and documents. I'm holding them." There was a pause. "Where are you?" "Sarasota, but he might be headed to Savannah." "I'll notify state investigators. And I want everything you found turned over as soon as possible." "I will," I said. "But I'm not backing off." She didn't argue. That night, I stayed in another motel. Different town. No repeat of the silver car, but my nerves were shot. The image of the mobile home, the box of tools, the tight-lipped man who just wanted this to go away. It all lingered like smoke. Paul wasn't just smart. He was networked. He used people like shells, discarded them when they became inconvenient. But Savannah. That was the first real location, the first forward step. And if he thought I'd stop now, he didn't know me at all. Savannah felt different. The air was thicker, slower. Spanish moss draped over old trees like secrets no one wanted to say out loud. I didn't have an address, just a city and a hunch. But sometimes that's enough when you're desperate. I called Rachel, told her what Martin had said. She knew someone in Savannah, an old friend of her aunt's, another near victim. Her name was Claire Ridley, 74, widowed, stroke survivor, lived alone on the east edge of town. Paul had visited her last year, posing as a bereavement counselor who helped elderly people manage their estates. The more I heard, the sicker I felt. Claire's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, partially hidden behind overgrown bushes and a sagging oak. I knocked twice before the door creaked open. She stood with a walker, white hair tied back, eyes sharp despite the faint tremor in her hand. "You're the girl Rachel called," she said. I nodded. "Come in, but don't expect tea. I stopped playing hostess the day someone tried to steal my life." Her living room was dark but orderly. Photo albums lined one wall. A small oxygen machine hummed beside her recliner. "He told me I was being taken advantage of," she said. "Said my lawyer was cheating me, my son didn't care. And the best thing I could do was protect myself before it was too late." "And you believed him?" I asked gently. Claire smiled, bitter and cold. "He was the first person who looked me in the eye in 6 months. That kind of loneliness makes you stupid." I didn't say anything. She wasn't stupid. She was human. Claire had been lucky. Her doctor noticed her medication levels were wrong. Someone had tampered with her prescriptions. That triggered a check-in from social services. By the time they arrived, Paul was gone. "He left so fast he forgot a few things," she said. I boxed them up. Couldn't bring myself to throw them out. She led me slowly down a narrow hallway. At the end, in a guest bedroom, was a battered suitcase and a stack of old file folders. On top, a journal, soft black leather. No title. "He kept notes," she said, like he wanted to remember who he was pretending to be. I opened the journal carefully, flipping through page after page of tiny, slanted handwriting. Lists of names, check marks, descriptions, towns. Some were crossed out. Some had $signs next to them. Then, on one page near the back, something new. James R. Halston, backup alias unused. Below it, driver's license created, 2019, registered in New York. POA template updated, only use if Paul A. compromised. My fingers froze. This was it. This was the fail-safe identity he hadn't yet deployed. And he documented it. Careless, maybe rushed. Or maybe he thought no one would ever get this far. Claire watched me from the doorway. "Can you stop him?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm close." "I want him to see my face when he loses," she muttered. "You might." That night, I booked a different motel. Something far from town, with a parking lot I could see from the window. I copied every page of the journal, took photos, backed them up, printed them twice. I didn't trust clouds anymore. Then I called the detective. "I have a second name," I told her. "A full alias he hasn't used yet, with a paper trail. Driver's license issued in New York." I could hear the shift in her voice. "That could change everything," she said. "Send me everything. Tonight." I did. 2 hours later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. "Ms. Caldwell?" the voice said. "Yes. This is Special Agent Dana Whitaker, Department of Financial Crimes. We've been tracking someone using multiple aliases to exploit the elderly across state lines. The name you provided, James R. Halston, matches a dormant file we've had flagged since 2021. My heart stopped. "He's real?" I whispered. He was, but he disappeared. Until now. I hung up slowly, letting the weight of it sink in. He wasn't just a local con man. He was federal level. He'd been working in the shadows for years, and I just pulled him into the light. The journal was still on the bed beside me. I flipped one more page. At the bottom was a single sentence, scribbled in red ink. Don't let them remember you. Only ghosts survive. But now I did remember him, and I wasn't the only one anymore. I hadn't been back to Cypress Lane since the day the police told me to leave. The house still looked the same from the outside. Same freshly trimmed lawn, same flower pots that weren't my mother's. But now I saw it differently, like it was wearing someone else's clothes. The new family had made it theirs, and I had no right to be here. But I also had no choice. If Paul missed something, if anything from my mother was still there, it would be hidden deep inside. And I had one last chance to find it before it was lost forever. I parked a block away and waited until dusk. The porch lights were on. I could see movement inside. The wife, pacing with the baby, the husband carrying a laundry basket. Normal life. I waited until they turned off the kitchen light. Then I walked up the driveway and rang the bell. She opened the door cautiously. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Sarah, right?" she said. "Is everything okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry to bother you again. I know this is a huge ask, but I was wondering if I could just come in for 5 minutes?" She hesitated. "There's something I think might still be in the house. Something of my mother's. Maybe in an old drawer or closet. I promise I won't take anything. I just need to look." She glanced behind her, clearly uncertain. "Please," I added. "It's important. It might help stop the man who did this." That got her attention. 5 minutes later, I was standing in my mother's old bedroom. The furniture was gone, the walls were repainted, but the built-in drawers in the closet were still there. She'd never let them be replaced. I dropped to my knees and opened the bottom one. Empty. Second drawer, a few old screws. Nothing else. Third, stuck. I tugged harder. It shifted just an inch, then stopped. I reached inside, feeling along the sides. And there it was, a false panel. My mother's emergency drawer. Inside, a small envelope, yellowed at the edges, taped shut. I pulled it out and peeled the tape with shaking fingers. Inside, a letter, handwritten, signed, dated 2 weeks before her death. I sat on the floor and read, "To Sarah, just in case something happens. I don't trust the man who's been helping me. He's too kind, too quiet. He asked me to sign something today. Said it was to help with medical forms. But the way he looked at the paper, it made me nervous. I didn't sign it. Not yet. I told him I'd sleep on it. If I'm gone and you're reading this, please know I tried to be careful. I think he's not who he says he is. His name is Paul Andrews, or at least that's what he told me." My throat closed. This was it. This was intent. Proof that she had doubts, that she hadn't consented. Not truly. A dated letter. In her handwriting, hidden on purpose. I took a photo, then another, then another. Behind me, I heard footsteps. The wife stood in the doorway. I stood slowly. "I found what I needed. I'm leaving." She didn't ask questions, just nodded. Outside, I called the detective. "I found a letter," I said breathlessly. "In my mother's handwriting, she wrote that she didn't trust Paul, that she refused to sign something. It's dated before the sale." There was a pause. "Where was it?" "In the old drawer, hidden." "I want a scan tonight," she said. "And I'm calling Agent Whitaker." By midnight, I was back in the motel. Email sent. Phone buzzing with replies. "This may be enough to obtain a federal warrant. We're moving fast now. You did good, Sarah." But I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, letter in hand, rereading every word. And for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not out of fear, not even out of anger, but because I heard her voice again, and because I was finally close to giving her peace. The call came early in the morning. I wasn't expecting it anymore. I wasn't hoping. I just kept going, as if the case had drifted into the background like a storm that never quite broke. "Ms. Caldwell," a woman's voice, clear, calm. "Yes. This is Agent Dana Whitaker, Department of Financial Crimes. We found him, the man you knew as Paul Andrews." My heart stopped for a beat. "Where?" I whispered. "A motel in upstate New York. He was using a different name. James R. Halston, one of the aliases from the journal you found. He made a mistake. Used a prepaid card linked to a stolen identity from Sarasota. We tracked it." She paused. "He's in custody. Federal charges have been filed. Serious ones. He won't be walking free anytime soon." Later that day, I received an email from the legal office. The sale of my mother's house had been declared fraudulent. The documents signed in her name, legally void. Ownership of the property was restored to me. The buyers, the young couple with the baby, were eligible for compensation through a victims' protection fund. But I sat and stared at that email for a long time, at the words, "property reinstated, eviction proceedings available upon request." And I knew I couldn't do it. I went back to Cypress Lane that evening just to look. The porch where my mom used to sip tea, the windows I once snuck out of as a teenager, the garden beds, now different, but cared for. Through the window, I saw the husband ironing a shirt, his wife feeding the baby, laughter behind closed curtains. This was their home now, and somehow it felt right. The next day, I signed a legal declaration. I relinquished the house to the family living there, and instead of them receiving compensation, it would go to me, the rightful heir, the one truly defrauded. I lost nothing. In fact, I gained everything: justice, closure, peace. And they kept a roof over their heads, free of fear, free of guilt. A week later, I stood at the edge of the property one last time. No announcement, no farewell, just a quiet goodbye. In my hand, I held the only thing I took from the house: a photo of my mother, sitting in the kitchen, holding her mug, smiling at someone just out of frame. Probably me. A few days after, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. One sentence inside: "You did the right thing. Thank you for the chance." I don't know who sent it. Maybe the wife. Maybe someone I'd helped. Maybe a version of myself I almost lost. I never went back to the house. Instead, I bought a small apartment by the bay. Bright, simple, quiet. No memories, but plenty of peace. On the shelf, that photo of Mom. Next to it, her handwritten letter, the one hidden in the drawer. Sometimes I still read it, not because I've forgotten, but because I want to remember the path we walked together. Later that year, I launched a blog, then a small support group, then an outreach project for elder fraud victims. The messages started coming: stories, fears, names, people who'd lost everything, or almost had. People who, like me, just wanted the truth. Now, when I stand in front of a room full of social workers and say, "My name is Sarah Caldwell. A stranger stole my mother's house and I took it back," I see eyes light up, some nod, some tear up. Some finally understand that this can happen. And now they know what to do. I didn't save everyone, but I saved myself. And I honored my mother. And in the end, I chose kindness. And that was enough.
If this story moved you, there's more to come. Subscribe